Welcome to your Success Tonic. If you're ready to explore what it would mean to step into your boldest, most exciting vision of success, then you're in the right place. Welcome to your Success Tonic. I am looking forward to my conversation with Valerie Mayen on the podcast today. Valerie is the owner of Yellowcake Shop, which is a handmade clothing brand. Yellowcake Shop is dedicated to producing high-quality, luxury, handcrafted garments within the United States. And they're specifically designed for the everyday working woman. So Valerie's brand takes pride in its commitment to creating ethically and socially responsible clothing items. So we're going to dive into that, into the world of slow fashion, entrepreneurship, and empowerment generally. So welcome, Valerie. So glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Valerie, I'm wondering if you can tell us what inspired you to start a slow fashion brand that prioritizes sustainability?
Yeah, it kind of, I would say it was equal parts happenstance and equal parts curiosity. When I first started making clothes, my way to fashion was it took a little bit longer. I actually started my creative journey as an illustrator. That's what brought me to Cleveland and took me to other art schools throughout the country. But I was intimidated by fashion, so I never pursued it until finally I got tired of, I was a bartender and I worked at a retail shop and I was good at putting things together. And so a lot of women would ask me at this bar that I worked at, if I made the clothes that I was wearing, and I just got tired of saying no. And so I decided to learn. And what inspired me to really pursue the slow fashion part of our industry, which, is much smaller than the fast fashion sector.
Yeah.
When I was researching, I knew how to sew enough, but I was researching how to scale or how to hire other sewers. And, I thought that the next thing to do was to find a CMT, which is like a cut, make, and trim shop, right? A factory to produce my goods so that I could then sell it wherever to anyone who would buy it.
Yeah.
And I came across this woman named Kathleen Fasanella. She has a blog called fashionincubator.com. So it has to have a hyphen in between fashion and incubator. If you don't put the hyphen, it takes you to a completely different website.
Right.
I found her. She's a woman that lives in New Mexico. She's a genius pattern maker. And she's on the spectrum. She has Asperger's, so I think it lends itself to her pattern making pretty well. And she has this blog that talks about slow fashion, small batch production, employing your neighbors. When you have more time than money, use your time until you can afford to outsource. It was a whole new way of thinking that I hadn't thought of. So she's really the one who inspired me to go into the slow fashion movement. And that really piqued my curiosity to learn more about it.
I love that. I love how these encounters, there's just this one connection that can help you everything changes based on that conversation, and that exchange of ideas. It's so powerful. Mm-hmm. But what challenges have you faced in sourcing sustainable materials?
Yeah, that's definitely the hard part. For me, once I learned from Kathleen what I learned to kind of start my way in the industry, I come from a very traditional, very conservative Latin American family. I'm not conservative myself, but I come from that background. Right. So it was always assumed for me that I would either become a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, have a typical job, right? Or I would marry well and be a mom and stay at home. But I wanted to go into creative industry, and I was very conflicted because, I always felt like fashion was a very shallow and self-glorifying industry, but learning about slow fashion, how you can really benefit, your neighbors and do things ethically and responsibly and move the needle in a positive direction. For me, that really motivated me. So I felt like I was still making an impact without, wasting my life, I guess. But the hard part is definitely the sourcing and the sustainability of a sustainable, quote unquote, fashion brand. Because, most consumers, especially in America, are conditioned to think that $5 for a t-shirt is normal, that, $40 for a dress is fine. And it just isn't. A lot of people don't know or don't care to know or don't want to know how their clothes are really made, how it contributes to it's one of the number one pollutants in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that's the hard part, is not just sourcing the materials, but sourcing the goods to be competitive, to be able to sustain your business.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then, and in this, in a world where there isn't a lot of awareness around what you're doing, that must be extra hard. Is there, what do you do to communicate the importance of sustainability to your customers and potential customers, to encourage them, to make these conscious choices?
Yeah, we do our best to connect with our consumers, or our clients, is how we call them, on what matters to them, right? What's important to them, because at the end of the day, as much as you want to believe that they care where it's made and they care who makes it and they care, that, like, I think there's that episode in Portlandia where they ask about the chicken, if the chicken was farm raised and was it happy, and
that's right.
They want to go meet the chicken, like, as much as we want to believe people care about those things, it's a very small percentage that does. Most people are motivated by how it makes them feel and how much it costs, right? So for us, we really try to add value by showing them, A, this can make you feel confident and you can kick ass at work, and B, even though it costs a premium initially, you're going to get X amount of dollars per wear, right? And so the long-term sustainability as it pertains to your pocketbook or your bank account is much better than buying cheap shit from H&M or Costco or Forever 21, Zara, wherever. So yeah, it's a struggle. It's always a struggle.
Course,
and at the end of the day, when you think about it, any brand that's making anything that's contributing to the heap is really not sustainable. None of us really are sustainable, but maybe we're doing a better job of it. We're all contributing to the pile, even if we're upcycling stuff, so as much as we want to consider ourselves the greenest of green, I think I try really hard to maintain communication with our clients that we're all about being realists, right? I'm not a purist, I'm not an idealist, I'm a realist. Like, what's practical, what's approachable, what can we actually do?
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful distinction. It's easy to get caught up in the idealism and to get, especially in the marketing of a brand, that it can get kind of, the story can kind of get amplified in ways that maybe aren't always, grounded in the real challenges that we have to face. So I'm really curious about your creative process. You described this journey that brought you eventually back to, your dream. So tell me more about your creative process and how you come up with new ideas.
Sure. Yeah, this is really fun for me. I mean, some people might not see it as fun. I think a lot of people assume that fashion designers, it's like the devil wears Prada kind of, glamorous. Right? We sit in an office in Manhattan and we make drawings and we boss people around and we send them away, and then we get to do all these fashion shows and rub elbows with celebrities. So for me, what I do is nothing like that, but I still love it just as much. I think there is a small part of me that would love that kind of life, but I really love the one I've carved out for myself. So I started making clothes. I have this story I always tell people, and I was maybe 1 year away from graduating in art school. I was in college. It was dead of winter here in Cleveland. I'd only been living here for maybe 2 years, and the only coat I had was this really awful North Face 1985 puffer coat that my mom bought me at Goodwill. And I had a date with this like super hot guy. He was like the hottest guy I ever dated. And I went to like the mall and I bought this super cute. I went to Charlotte Russe of all places, ironically. And I bought myself this like tube top and these cute pants. And I looked amazing. But then I had to wear my jacket and I put it on. I got in the car and the jacket was so puffy that it like literally puffed up around me when I'm sitting there. And I felt ridiculous.
It's not a good feeling.
And I had to wear it for most of the date, because we were walking to the restaurant. So I kept telling myself, like, there has to be a coat that I could wear that I wouldn't feel this dumb and ridiculous, and I would feel much more stylish in. And so I started making coats. That was really how I started getting into fashion in general. I made coats. I read a book by Manolo Blahnik, the famous shoe designer, and he was actually in theater and in costuming before he became Manolo Blahnik. And his mentor told him, find one thing that you love and become the master of that thing. And that's how you'll success. So for me, it was coats. I live in Cleveland, and women here will justify the expense of a coat. They'll justify paying, hundreds of dollars for a coat than they will before they justify spending that much on a dress or a top or pants, because the coat to them is like a purse that you can wear, right? And they know they'll get more wear use out of it as utility. So I like to marry the things like style and fashion with function and saleability and, function. It's the practical
Mhm.
nature of it. So how's it going to live in the world? How are you going to get in and out of it? Is it going to be a bother when you're sitting down on a subway or in a car? How many pockets are there? And what would you need them for? Your phone or your keys or your pocketbook or your kids stuff? So I really think about a lot of that when I'm creating and designing, and that's probably the favorite part of my process, because most women will tell you, a big selling point for them is pockets, right? Such a
Yeah.
simple thing, a pocket. A lot of our garments, actually all of our garments, except for one dress, has pockets, and it's a minimum of 2, maximum of 5. And a lot of women's clothing don't have pockets in them because each seam will affect the bottom line. It's most stores charged by the seam, and most fashion companies are managed by men. And women's clothing didn't have pockets back in the day. It started because men wanted to control women. They didn't want women to have access to things on their person. So you look at little kids' pants, like little boys' pants. Even little boys' pants have pockets, but there's a lot of women's clothing that doesn't.
Mhm.
And I think for me, that's a big part of how I design, is thinking of how it's going to live in the world and who's going to use it.
Yeah, I love that, because I think you're absolutely spot on. There are so many things so many garments are not designed with lifestyle in mind, the lifestyle of the person who's going to use it or wear it. Um, and when you do have that piece of clothing that does meet that, you're like, oh, this pocket's perfect. My phone fits just right, or whatever it is. It's just like, so you love that piece of clothing, right? You can't stop wearing it.
Yeah, it's like when you wear that pair of pants that you haven't worn for a while because you're like, oh, I should wear these. I haven't worn them in forever. And then you do, and you realize they don't have pockets, and you're like, I remember why I never wore
Yeah,
these.
exactly. Um, so yeah, I mean, so we've talked about some of the challenges that you faced in this journey, and I'm wondering, what would you say might be the biggest challenge that you faced in your career so far?
Oh man, that's a really good question. And because there's so many challenges.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
well, I mean, aside from the IRS seemingly taking all of our money, I would say the biggest challenge has been funding, and just really moving the needle forward on your business as a woman.
Yeah.
And especially, luckily or unluckily, I'm Latin American. I love my heritage, but I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. My dad was a home builder, and lucky for us, he was building homes in a really nice area. We were able to afford to live there, even though we didn't really have the same status or bank account as our neighbors. So we spoke Spanish in our home up until a certain point. My dad didn't want us being held back in school because of our accents, so we stopped speaking Spanish in the home. We assimilated very quickly. And some people don't know who or what I am, right? They think I'm very white passing. I could be Italian or Hawaiian or any number of things. So I sound like a white girl, right? So I think that has helped me, I guess, to maybe avoid some kind of discrimination that I know a lot of my aunts and my tias and tios and my cousins maybe have faced. But I think more than anything, being a woman in general, my husband was able to qualify for loans that I couldn't qualify for, even though I have more money in my bank account than he does, even though I've been in business longer than he's worked at his job. And so, it may just be the luck of the draw, or it could be, gender discrimination, or it could be a number of things. But I think for a lot of small businesses that are my size, it is difficult to grow to, the level of some other big brands that have really skyrocketed. And not having a business degree, doesn't, I think a lot of what I've learned through trial and error, through books, through, learning from others. But yeah, I think if I had the credentials, if I had the means to go to Harvard Business School or to get an MBA, I think maybe my situation might be different. So those challenges are very prevalent. And I've seen that a lot with women of color in general. I mentor a few female-owned businesses that are run by women of color. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what I'm seeing with them is that their products are outstanding. And when I find a brand or a business that's similar to theirs and it's owned by someone from the dominant paradigm, their visibility and their growth is very different. And it could be access to resources, and it also could be access to knowledge, and they just don't know what they don't know. And I think some of that really is what happened to me in the first 7 years of my business. So I think luckily now that I've got access to some tools I didn't have before, I'm shouting it from the rooftops, and I'm doing my best to bring everyone into the fold that I can.
Yeah, I think that that's really so important what you're doing, and I just want to, celebrate what you're doing, because it's so important to raise others alongside us as we're moving forward in our journey, and helping people who do not have access to all the resources, or who are encountering bias or discrimination. It's so important, just to try to give more hope, spread more hope, and allow people to flourish. Really, it's crucial. Yeah. So would you have any insights or advice that you would share with a young aspiring woman of color entrepreneur who's thinking of doing something similar to you in fashion?
Sure. Yeah. I would say, first of all, don't go at it alone. For me personally, when I started my business, I just assumed that I had to do everything myself because, I was my best resource, and I didn't know I could afford employees until much later in my business. I think for me, I was living kind of an immigrant mentality and scarcity mode,
Yeah.
But also there's so many resources around us now that weren't available to a lot of women even 10 years ago. Here in Cleveland, I could swing a dead cat and hit a small business incubator program. There's so many of them. And the one that I worked with, I worked with a couple, they're not all, they're not all great. They're not all built the same, but the one that I finally landed upon, it was really, really impactful for me. And it really helped me see parts of my business that I didn't understand before.
Yeah.
But it also helped me to see what my business was capable of. I always believed that because I was a woman and a woman of color in a small business, I just figured I would always just be small, right? My business would make enough money to pay employees and pay the expenses, and maybe I could get my nails done every other month, and that was enough for me. But I didn't aim for more because I didn't know I could achieve more. It wasn't until I started seeing other women that looked like me, and Black and brown women, doing bigger things, doing things that rich white men do. And it really inspired me to try things I hadn't tried before. Like I just bought a building this past April, right? And everyone told me that I couldn't. I live in a neighborhood that used to be very questionable and a little sketch and super cheap to live in. And over the last 10 years, it's become very affluent, and there's $500,000 condos next to a street where you could get shot. Like it's bizarre, but this neighborhood is expensive. And a lot of people told me, like, they literally laughed in my face and said I couldn't buy a building in this neighborhood. And they said, you should go to Clark Fulton or go to Parma or go to, Old Brooklyn. These are all places that are fine and good for other people, but they're not where I know my business can thrive and the businesses I want to bring here can thrive. And we did it. It took me 2 years, but I did it. And I would have never thought I could if I hadn't seen these examples of other women doing something similar or greater. So I think what I would say to young designers is, obviously, don't get ahead of yourself, right? Don't put the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse. I forget how that one goes.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. So I would say, don't get ahead of yourself. Take your time, right? But access the resources around you. There's most likely free or near free or low cost initiatives like small business incubators, especially for women, grants if you can get them. But also, I'll tell you this much too, and this might sound salesy, I promise you it's not, but investing your money is so important. I had a mentor a couple years ago during COVID who mentioned to me, we happened to do really well during COVID, and we made a lot of money that year, and we had more than I am used to. And so he said, you should invest some of that money. And I'd never considered that because investing just seemed so over my head. It was something that I just never thought was for me as a woman who wasn't great with numbers. Why would I invest, right? That's for, again, rich white guys on Wall Street, right? That's what I thought. Mm-hmm. But there are so many resources now for women, and podcasts and books that are teaching women specifically how to invest, how to manage your money, how to grow your wealth, because we can't save our way to wealth, and we can't work ourselves sick to wealth. And the sooner you start investing, the better. I wish I started investing 20 years ago. I'd have $1 million by now with compound interest. Yeah. So it sounds salesy and it sounds weird and it sounds scary, but there's so, The Girls That Invest is a book that I read. They have a podcast too, and I love them. This girl, Sim, she's 25 and she's a millionaire because her parents taught her how to invest when she was 12. And so I think that's important for young designers to know. If access to capital and funding is difficult, start investing your money now. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be $5 a week. Anything, really. Just start. And yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Mm. So many pearls of wisdom there, Valerie. Thank you so much. Great advice. I love it. Yes. Reaching out for help and being in a mastermind or incubator kind of experience where you have other people doing things that you haven't even thought of yet is so expansive. That was definitely my experience too. And one of the reasons why I run my own group programs, because I know just what the possibilities are and the transformations that are on the other side of that, which are life-changing, like buying a building, you know, congratulations. That's incredible.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's a lot. We have a big road ahead of us, but we've already got, you know, a few other tenants coming into the building. So we're making it a multi-purpose space. And 85% of the businesses we have coming in are owned by women of color. And in this neighborhood, a lot of the businesses are run by people from the dominant paradigm, and the majority of the real estate is owned by rich white men. So I'm only a co-owner of the building because I had to have an investor. No way I could do it otherwise. But it's still a start. It's you know, I'd rather have a small piece of a watermelon than a big piece of a grape. And so I'm excited to start here, and hopefully it'll grow, and you know, who knows. But I want to bring anyone I can along for the ride. So yeah, I'm excited.
Amazing. And so, yeah, let's switching gears a little bit. Well, before we started recording, you mentioned that there are some toys behind you. And I want to ask you if you'd be willing to share, you know, how you balance the demands of running a business and up-leveling the way you've described while being a mother.
Yeah, it's super hard. It's so fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's definitely the hardest job I've ever done. And you know, I have 2 kids. I love both my children equally. I was not prepared to be a mom of 2 children. I honestly, if I'm being honest, as a woman, I don't feel guilty saying this now, but I did before. I would have been content with just 1 child. But we had a second one, and she's here now, and I love her. I love her incredibly. But you know, I think for me, balancing things as a mom, people say the work-life balance is unattainable, and I don't disagree. However, I'll say this with the caveat that, you know, I've been reading a shit ton of books lately, or listening, I guess I should say. I love listening to books. I've been listening to a lot of books by Michael Hyatt, and he runs this business with his daughter-in-law. It's called the Full Focus Plan, right? And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds really salesy and super basic. But as a person with ADHD and a mom and a person that's busy, this is probably one of the first planners I've ever had that really helps me to prioritize my day and not get distracted with all the things, right? So it forces you to only pick 3 things a day that you're going to work on. Because most entrepreneurs, they make their lists like miles long. I'm guilty of the same thing. And sometimes I'll write things in a planner, and I'll put it in my phone, and I'll put it in 3 places, and I'll forget it, or I'll forget what I put. So I love this planner. I bought it for all my employees. I love it. And I literally was crying the other day when I was making a schedule. I was talking to my husband, and I was like, I'm so excited that this is actually helping me with my ADHD, because that's been my biggest challenge. But I think, you know, from reading his books and working with this planner, I think a work-life balance is attainable. It just might not always feel balanced, you know, and a lot of unlearning, and a lot of persistence, and a lot of hard work. I don't have that right now. I definitely have the propensity to do too much. I love being busy. I love working. And, you know, in the last few years, I've definitely had a fire under my ass to really find ways to grow wealth for my family. You know, my parents, you know, they didn't leave my sisters and I. We don't have an inheritance. We don't have any money. We don't have anything to inherit from them. You know, so I don't have any generational wealth in my family to live off of or to pass on. And I want to build that for my girls. And so I'm doing that in the ways that I've learned to know how. So I'm fixing my basement to Airbnb my house, and I, you know, bought another property, and we're gonna, you know, renovate that and live there, and, you know, short-term rental our whole house here because we have a good location. And I got this building now, and I'll have tenants there. So I'm doing the best that I can to really prepare myself for a long-term benefit. but it's definitely not easy. They always say it takes a village, and it definitely does. We've got friends of my daughter's, school that, we help each other with pickups during the summer for summer camp, and we'll have play dates at each other's houses so that one of us can get a break during the week, and that's helpful. But, I go to bed later than I'd like to, and I wake up later than I'd like to, and I don't work out as often as I'd like to. So that's kind of how I manage. I manage by not really always managing best. That's where I'm at now, but I'm also doing what I can to educate myself and train myself in ways that I can do better. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think that working more is best, but sometimes working less is going to give you the restorative time that you need to be able to work more productively at your job the next day. So you don't have to work as long. We're actually going to be initiating a 4-day work week with my team after we've onboarded these 2 employees. So after 3 months of a new employee onboarding, they get the opportunity to do a 4-day work week. And we give it a 1-month trial. And if productivity isn't affected and we do well and we can still maintain efficiency, then we keep it at a 4-day work week. And it's, kind of like that mindset, right? Like the job takes the time allotted, right? When you think about, like, when you go out and you take a purse with you, if you have your big purse, you fill it with a ton of shit and it's super heavy. Small little purse, you have to go out, you fill it with your lip gloss and your phone and your wallet, and that's it, right? So, the job takes the time allotted, and studies have shown that people that do 4-day work weeks, they get more done because they fit it in the shorter time frame, and they have a longer weekend to look forward to, and they're much more restored. So it's hard to do. It's scary as fuck, and it feels backwards, but I think that's the way that we're going to be able to achieve the balance that we're looking for. So get back to me in 6 months and we'll see where we're at.
Yes, I will. I'd love to hear about this 4-day work week, which sounds amazing. Definitely something I'm working towards as well. And I do think that the idea of work-life balance is sometimes, the idea in itself is a lot of pressure, because I think there are times when one is just going to take precedence over the other, right? There's just going to be times when you just need to pour into your family, and the work has to take, just take less of your time. And then the other way around, there's going to be times when the work has just got to be the thing. And the idea that we have to have it all perfectly balanced is another way that we beat ourselves up. So I think you're doing an amazing job.
I'm literally trying. I'm doing the most out here.
I can tell. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you the question I ask my guests and that is, how has your definition of success evolved over time?
Oh, that's such a good question, man. I'm like, how much time do we have to talk about this?
Yeah.
So, I just started working with a business coach last November. I had a hard time finding one that I trusted. They all seemed kind of like scammy to me. Yeah. But I found one that recommended, and he's great. He's pretty good. He had me do, in our second session, he had me do this thing called your ideal day, right? And so he had me write down on paper, as long as I wanted, what my ideal day would look like in 5 years, right? And he said, make it so detailed, like, what do you eat for breakfast? What are you wearing in the morning? What time do you go to bed? Like, really detailed. And when I wrote it down and I read it back to myself, I really believed it. And when I thought about those things before, I was like, man, those things feel so far off. They're never going to happen. But when I read it and I wrote it, I was like, holy shit, this sounds amazing. This could happen, Yeah. And my idea of success now looks very different. I think before I had kids, it was like, my idea of success was keep my business open long enough to be able to maybe afford a nicer place and nicer clothes and, fancier dinners out, right? That was my level of success. Then my next level of success was, okay, I want to be successful enough to be memorable and to be, visible nationwide and to be a household name. And then my level of success was like, you know what? Screw that. I don't care if people know me. I just want to have enough money to retire early. I want to have enough money to leave my kids something so that they can either, use it for college, use it to buy a house, use it to start their own business, what have you. And I want to have options. I think a lot of women were taught to think that money is bad. Like, if we want money for ourselves, we're a gold digger. Or if we want to be millionaires, we want to be wealthy, that's evil, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We want money will allow us to leave a relationship that doesn't suit us. Money will allow us to leave a job that doesn't serve us. Money will allow us to be able to fix our leaky roof and also still buy our groceries, money will give us options. They'll allow us to take vacations we couldn't afford, so we can have time with our families, so we can rest our bodies. They'll allow us to have the clothes that fit us best, and I don't think that's bad or wrong. So for me, my level of success now is taking control of my financial freedom and my financial literacy, because that's something my mother never really had, and it kept her in situations that I think really didn't serve her. So yeah, my level of success is being able to retire, hopefully before 66, and maybe I'll get a boob job. I don't know, like, I buy it to my kids, and my boobs are like
whatever
so
you want, right? You can have
yeah,
whatever you want. Yeah.
right. And I used to think that was also wrong, but like, who cares? It's your body. Do what you want if you're not hurting anyone. So yeah, I'm gonna do me. That sounds so cheesy and so typical, like YOLO, right? But like, I'm just gonna do me, what's best for me and my family. And if I can bring others along the way, I will do it. If I can create opportunities for other women of color, hell yeah. And if I can have a seat at the table to make change where it really counts, you better believe it. And I think the way I'm gonna get there is through building wealth for my family. Yeah, that's my new level of success.
Mic drop moment there, Valerie. Fantastic. Yes. Absolutely. I just love it, because I think that financially empowered women are able to do so much more and help others, other women too, and empowered women empower entire communities. And so this is important, deeply important work what you're doing.
And you know what someone taught me that I really loved? Someone told me that, empowerment is a tricky thing, right? Because empowerment, the word itself, connotates that someone else had to give you that power. But sometimes, some instances, we acquire that power on our own, or we seek it out ourselves, right? And so someone was like, maybe the better word for women to use is emboldening. It doesn't roll off the tongue as easily. It has more syllables, right? But if I can embolden someone to empower themselves, or embolden someone to be inspired to action, that to me sounds kick-ass. Like I love that. I think I really hope that that's something that women can understand for themselves more, is that we can embolden others and ourselves. And so we don't have to wait for someone else to empower us, or someone else to give us that power. We just have to have the inspiration and the desire to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Inspiration is such a big part of that kind of activating of the power within, for sure. Yeah. So thank you, Valerie, for being here today and sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us. And I want to ask you, how can listeners find you online?
Sure. They can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, and our website. You can search us on Instagram just by looking up Yellowcake Shop, just like the dessert. It's the American spelling, not the British spelling. So it's one P at the end. So Yellowcake, all one word, and then SHOP, it's all one word, just like it's grammar. And then on Facebook, we're at Yellowcake Shop, CLE for Cleveland. And our website, yellowcakeshop.com. So yeah, you can email us, DM us, send us a smoke signal. We will answer you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Valerie. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and go out and make more amazing things happen.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
Hey, have you taken the Success Archetype quiz yet? If not, head on over to storytonic.co to take the quiz and discover how to leverage your unique profile to step into your next vision of success.